All right, we're ready to start. So, hi, Anjanette. Thank you for being here again with us.
Yay! It's totally my pleasure. I love answering these questions. I love it.
And I know the last time we spoke, we were like, oh my God, there's so much stuff we could talk about again. So we definitely need you back again. And
Yay.
one of the things that came up in our first conversation that I thought it would be great to have you here again to talk about is something that has popped up actually in the group with the new members joining. And so I thought this is the perfect time. So
Yay.
there is this sentence that you said that stuck with me that was, the first draft is for the writer. And given that most of the people in our group are writing memoirs, so they are writing self-help books, but also based on their personal experience.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what is your take? Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah. Look, this process is the same even if you're writing fiction. So there are a couple of things that I'll address. That is one of the most important parts that when I'm working with writers from concept to completion. This is the thing that I keep reminding them, that first draft is for them, because one of the things that comes up as you start writing is your internal editor will try to catch you and say, well, no, but you're going off on a tangent, or you're doing this. So the first thing I want to address is structure. It may be hard. A lot of people like to write free form and just think, I'm going to write from the beginning to the end. I mean, it's definitely not the end if you're waking up tomorrow. But without structure, it can feel, that internal editor can get louder, especially when you're writing memoir, because it is more easy to go off on a tangent or veer from the path. And in fact, the other part of your internal editor can help you do that if you're not working to structure and it's all just stream of consciousness. I'm going to write what wants to come up. Because you might be writing about something that's triggering you now, or just part of you. And so that part in you is going to say, hey, we won't write about that now. Let's just write about this thing over here. And then you go off track. So starting with at least a basic structure is actually more freeing than writing freewheeling, right? That way, if you do go off on a tangent, you can use that. And this is one of the points of the second part that I was talking about. You can use that to do some work on yourself. That's not necessarily in the manuscript, but the more you can be an observer of what's actually happening while you're writing, the better for you. When I'm saying it's for you, and there was a question we sort of prompted, or you gave me an insight into some of the questions. So apologies if I'm talking about one ahead, but it's totally relevant. Does the first draft for me mean it's for me as I'm writing it, or is it what I'm writing, like the content? And it's both, because what I've observed is that even if you think you have a super clear idea and you've got everything worked out of exactly how the story's going to go as you write it, I love that you're nodding, because you get this. I know you get this so hard. You will change as you're writing, and hallelujah, that's what I live for. Right?
Yes.
I live for watching that. I was just talking to one of my clients last week, and I think we'd started talking in March, and he was saying, like, we were just reflecting a little bit on how different he feels inside and how different he is in his writing from those first initial conversations in March to now. It was I don't know, like, I write poetry or I write short story, but long form, like a whole book, like, I don't know. And so my job is to simply hold space and continue. And now it's like he almost can't stop. And I'm saying, we have enough content for the book. If you want, you don't have to keep going. Like, we can construct the book from what you've got. But it just keeps coming. And I said, see, I told you, getting words onto the page is not the problem. And it's never a problem. But allowing yourself to go there and recognizing that you will be transformed by the writing that you do. Right?
I just love that, because this is one of the things, like so many things that you said are things that I say, is that the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is that I have witnessed it on myself. Writing a book is a life transforming experience. Like, you can't imagine, you can't fathom the way you think it's just about getting words on paper, but it's so much more than that.
So much more. Yeah, it's so much more.
I love also that you said, like, I could be like, amen to so many of the things that you said. Like, I found it so freeing to have a structure. And I think both Chris and I have spoken about having an outline for your book. And as a Gemini, I kind of resent or do not want structure, but I have found that having an outline for my book was liberating. It allowed me to, explore everything, because I knew I was contained somehow, and so I could play within that structure without going too far.
Yeah, well, we have that we have the internal editor is like what a lot of people call fear or ego. And what happens is, if I liken it to getting into a car and not putting in a GPS destination, if you don't know where you're headed, you can take forever to get there, because where's there? Whereas if you have this loose structure, you have like, I want to end up around here on night 1 and around here on night 2, something like that. And if circumstances change along the way, so you run into a town and they're having a big parade and you love it, okay, cool, change it. But at least you know where you want to end up next to finally get to that destination. So oftentimes with people, I say it's okay to know where you're going to start, but it's more important to have that clarity of intention, is what I call it, which is, where do you intend to end up? Even if it changes. I don't know a writer who doesn't change their outline in process. So just let it go. However, a lot of starter writers like you have the experience initially of like, oh, that feels like such a drag. It's actually a self-sabotage, to be honest. Most writers cannot write well to no structure.
Yes,
right?
and in fact, I've shared that in some places, I think in the book as well, because the first attempt to write my book was with no draft, with no outline. And after chapter 10, I was like, okay, wait a second, where am I going? Why am I doing this? And that's when I started again from scratch with an outline, which was way better. So totally. And I also love the fact that you said the outline is going to change, because we are changing as we write, and as we explore the chapters, as we explore these lessons that we want to share, we realize that, oh, there's this and oh, there's that is relevant to where we want to go. And many people think that having an outline is limiting, but
like it locks you in.
But it's like, no, it's just a like a temporary, if you want, like what's the name? A tentative itinerary, but then as you go, you change because you are the driver. And
well, and I also say sometimes writing a book is like getting pieces of a puzzle, but you don't have that handy dandy like outside box to tell you exactly what it's going to look like. And often, and when I say often, I mean like 90% of the time, you don't have all the pieces, even if you think you do. And part of why I get so jazzed about it. Obviously, my background in psychology just lends itself to this fascination, but you don't know until you know. You cannot put certain pieces together until you are standing on the other side. And it's not, this goes to a little bit to another question that we'll address, but essentially, I want the writers to be in the writing as much as possible, because that's where we can get that emotional authenticity that we need. If you're talking about everything as if you're an omniscient, like I'm back here, it's very hard for you as the writer to make the transformation that you were put on this earth to make for yourself. So
Yes.
it's a little bit controversial, and I find it, I don't know why, because I'm a literary agent, because I work and sell people's manuscripts, it's controversial to say. At the heart of me, I don't care if you don't finish or publish a book. But I do care that you write it. Why? Because that's the point. That's why the first draft is for the writer always. Not every book will be published, but you had to write it.
I just love what you're saying, because I actually had this conversation with one of my clients, and she was like, oh, but I kind of want to write this story instead, but I don't know what's the purpose going to be. And I said to her, there is so much healing in that story, so let's just write that story and then not care about whether we're going to get that published or not. Let's just write it. Because this is where the gold lies, because it's for you first. And this is what you said, the first draft is for the writer.
Yeah, here's the truth. You will write a better story writing the story that wants to come out than trying to write the story that you think should be out there. That's all very intellectual, and too many writers, I mean, it's a human thing, but we often get caught in our head, right? And it's like, oh, so-and-so, I can't tell you that the only times I've seen people struggle with finishing are when they can't make that connection between what their head says they should write and what their heart tells them they should write. I should do a little series on this, but I'm super excited lately because just last week I got to watch my writer. She did a Facebook Live signing her contract. Now, I have known her for years online. I've never met her in person. And she came to me a couple of years ago, kind of nervous, and had been a freelance writer, and said, I want to do a book, but it was a very intellectual, like, this is the topic, and I can get all these experts, and I, as you are teaching people, especially if they're writing memoir, and as you said, writing memoir, but with the helpful bent, and that's totally good, but the very first thing you need to concentrate on is the personal story, is the memoir, because that's what makes you unique. The rest of it is like, honestly, we are dead with content. But what we need is your personal take, and everything that Megan was the very first client that I have taken full circle from just the concept and gave her permission to write the memoir first, and then we would structure it if we needed to. She finished the memoir, which is funny because one of the first things she said to me is, I have a horrible memory, so I can't write a memoir. My memory's horrible. And then I've sold her manuscript to a publisher, a debut author, who is not a celebrity, getting their manuscript optioned by a traditional publisher. Like, I can't even tell you how excited I am. But to know she went through that process of saying, no, I'm going to make it about this, and I'll interview the people who really know, and my story will just be this little itty bitty part over here. By giving her permission to open up, she, like, for somebody who has a bad memory, let me tell you what, she drops some bombshells. And it's the reason the manuscript got picked up is because she's that brave. She is that vulnerable. She says stuff that you think, I guarantee you, if you're writing a memoir, these are things you're thinking, oh, I won't put that in because legally I'm not sure if I can. Like that, I mean, that's valid. But I tell you what, the way that I had her write this first draft, and this is barely different from the first draft. I mean, it is, but it isn't. I just said, you lay it all out there, your truth, all of it. And if any of it is too shocking or too inflammatory or salacious, we'll just edit that. But you cannot start your process lying. And that's what it is. Editing before you've written it down, like in your brain, you're already deciding what is available to put down on the page. Nah.
I'm getting goosebumps from what she's
Yeah.
saying. But I just love that she's saying it is lying, because it is. It is lying by omission. It is lying because you're actually changing things around.
What? Yeah, people will get it. I came up with a term that's not as good. I might have told you before, but I call it Norman Rockwelling. It is an American artist who would always paint these really idyllic scenes. And when we Norman Rockwell our writing in first draft process, we have lost it. Because what your reader feels is, oh, I'm getting to it. And then all of a sudden they're like, what just happened? I'm not, oh. They don't maybe even identify with what it is. They're just not buying what you're selling anymore, because energetically you knew you were not telling the whole truth. So even if you tell the whole truth and it is dirty and you don't need to, guess what? I would have said this last time. You can edit that out, but the energy that remains is paramount, is most important. So if there are particular details that don't need to be in there, that's where an amazing editor can help you. In our first draft, sometimes we just have to get stuff out, right? It's a purge. And we just have to process, and maybe we overshare about somebody else's life. And an editor, seeing through the filter of a potential reader, can tell you, you know what, like you'd already made your point. I don't even need to know that. I already know what that person is like. You don't need to give me extra dirt on them. So we take it out. But because you as the writer were honest the entire time, your honesty, your truth, it remains. And your reader will go, damn, she is really revealing. Like, wow. Even if you're like, oh, but there was so much more to that story. It doesn't matter. We didn't need those details. You know what I mean?
And there's two things that I want to say. Well, first, one thing that Chris said, and I keep repeating it to my clients, is that an editor can edit things out, but he or she cannot edit things in.
Right.
So you just focus on writing. And I think, once again, the first draft is for the writer. So write all the shit that comes to your mind out, and then let the editor do their work, because your work is not to edit, your work is to write, to get stuff out.
Yes, and they help you make sure that it comes out in the smoothest way possible, so that your sentences aren't awkward. So every time you think of, let me do that better, I think better than fixing it, just put a note. I don't like the way that sounds. That's not exactly right. And telling self or the internal editor, I'm going to move forward. I made a note. I'm going to look at it, or Chris is going to look at it, or whoever editor will look at it. But me, I'm going to, because you're right, and Chris is right. She can't write your story. I can't write your story. Anik can't write your story. You have to write it. And a really good editor can sometimes get a sense of where you've left something out. So it's possible, but let me tell you, if anything is painful, that's painful as a writer, to have to go back in, and you have to get out of your editorial mind, you have to go back into your creative mind, you have to and go, like put yourself back there and get that authentic energy going. Why not save yourself the hassle and just be present with whatever you're writing right then and put more. Here's the truth with fiction too, because I know that you deal with some fiction writers, and I'm going to suggest that some of your people might want to think about fixing their memoir problems by calling it fiction. You can actually get closer to your truth if you give yourself that escape. It's you circumvent the conscious mind by fictionalizing it from the get-go. Every fiction writer knows they are in their characters. Even if they're imagining their characters, they're in there. So you will make that connection. And because the character is likely still going to be somewhat like you, you're going to have a stronger bond. And that's okay. But what helps is if there are things that are really triggering you or you're super afraid of, fiction can be a way to get around it. Now, what I was going to say with fiction, though, is that structure is still important, and that honesty is still important. And fiction writers know sometimes you write more, not sometimes, almost all the time, you write more in your first draft than you'll need because you are living out the story and you don't know until you get it out. So I have this with my writers often. They will, they're actively working things out. It's sort of almost like, even if you're not writing fantasy or sci-fi, you're still figuring out how the world works, especially if it's not exactly you, it's a fictional character. You're figuring things out and you're differentiating. So there are things you share. So writing 101, when you introduce a character, you do not like scan them like a robot and tell everything about what they look like and their almond shaped eyes and their thick lustrous mahogany hair and their lightly freckled skin and the rippling mouth, whatever. You don't do that. You do what we do when we meet someone. We might notice a couple of things, but then we're in with the action. The person's talking or whatever, right? But in your first draft, you might need to get that all out because you're just meeting this character.
Yeah.
So you write it all, and then you make a note to yourself, come back and cut the hell out of this and sprinkle that in later. I don't need to know her hair is curly, a bit dry on the ends. Like, nobody cares. That's too much, right? Where's the action?
I just love that. That's another piece of gold that you just said is make a note and move forward, because it tranquilizes it calms down your inner editor, your ego, and it says, hey, I heard you. This piece might not be ready yet, but I'm moving on, but I will come back to it later. So similar.
Yes, I call it making friends with the internal editor. When you do that, and you know, different clients have different ways of doing it really effectively. Some actually talk to the internal editor. So some of them will write the notes in the manuscript. Some of them will write it on the side. I just find it really effective, especially as I said, sometimes the best stuff that we get is by observing ourselves as we're writing, because that can give us more clues, and that helps you get used to that process, right? To observe yourself, be in yourself, and then have a conversation, because self has multiple voices, and the sooner we can get real with that truth and not think that makes us some sort of, you know, dissociative disorder person. We're not. We just have different voices to different fears and different concerns, right? So as soon as we say, oh, the best way to move forward is not to ignore that. You with pets, me with children, you will find that if you try to ignore them and work anyway, it makes it harder and harder. Just turn, address them. What is it you need? Thank you so much. You either sort it now or you say, I heard you, thank you, I'll do that in 5 minutes. Your internal editor is the same as that really pesky but gorgeous pet or child that will just get louder. So don't try it the other way. You're just giving yourself more hard work. but moving forward is paramount.
And there's
Done.
one thing that I'm curious to hear you elaborate a little bit. When you said a piece of advice that you're giving is that is fictionalizing memoirs. So do you mean fictionalizing it all the way through, like saying I, Anik, am writing a novel, or just in my mind saying I am writing as if I'm writing fiction?
No, you really need to give it to yourself wholesale, and here's why. Because you're smart. And if you're writing, you're smart. And it doesn't matter how you judge yourself. It's just again, we're working with what we know about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And this has come from watching people do it. So I've had a program even called Fix It with Fiction, and it really revolved around using a really common trope in commercial women's fiction, which is like the love triangle, you know, like a Bridget Jones, like I love, and then all I'm looking for is love, and then they go and then they get their heart broken because of course they fall for the one they shouldn't fall for, and then they go back out and eventually they end up with the nicer guy with the heart of gold. And my process around that was that in fact that's just perpetuating this focus on the wrong person in the story. The person we should be focusing on is Bridget. So we use that fictional trope that we're all very, very attuned to. And then as we get to the part where we're on the sofa eating the ice cream, and then our friends pull us back out off the sofa and out, I would start to help them direct to finding ways that they fall in love with themselves. Whether they end up with a guy or a girl or a, I don't know, a dog at the end is like neither here nor there. It's really about falling in love with the person that deserved the love in the beginning. The whole reason we get stuck in all our relationships, right, and feel disempowered is because we're painting and focused on the wrong subject of the painting, right?
You're just making me my mind.
This, yeah, I'm here to blow your mind today, we really keep that most important character kind of fuzzy and blurry because we're told that's not the important one, all the change, but all change happens inside. It can't happen outside. It has to, everything we've been talking about, right? The change, that's why the first draft is for the writer. The change is happening inside. So for your memoir writers who are worried about family members or community members or whatever, here's my advice. If you find yourself still being triggered, even though, and still trying to edit a little bit, even though you've given yourself permission that, guess what, it's not a thing that you write it and it just automatically gets uploaded to a publisher in the sky and then disseminated, like nobody's going to see this version. You write all of your truth, all the ugly truth about yourself, about others, your truth. And then you can go back and edit, right? If that is not working for you, and only you can know if it's working for you or not. If you still find yourself second guessing in the moment, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't write that, then stop and write it as a novel. And I would say start over again. You've got, the beautiful thing is when you're doing this, you've actually got the container. You have the starting point, and you should have that 180-degree transformation. Even if it's small, you've still got it. So awesome. Now you call the character something else. And here's what's beautiful. You don't call them exactly you. You don't make them exactly you. Give them stuff that's similar, but have fun with it. Like, be something you wish you could have been, because the truth is that you, as the writer, every fiction writer changes during their work too. Even if they're not writing about themselves, they still get the transformation. Why? Because it just, I don't know, it's just how it works. So, because you're really writing about you, you're getting some transformation, either a revelation about how you've been living and you don't want to live anymore, or how you always perceived a certain dynamic this way. This has just recently happened to one of my clients. And now they're like, it doesn't justify what was done in a particular dynamic, but all of a sudden they have the insight to, oh my God, this is how I've been contributing to that. Wow. Sometimes you have to do it, but just like I said, have fun. Let them have a job you always wanted, or living somewhere you always wanted, or who cares? Guess what? All of that's changeable. A client that, a past client who now is on her third, she's going through the editing. So like, I guess final editing for her third novel. I helped her with her first. Now that first novel, her character was American, and but the writer is Australian. There were all sorts of reasons, but essentially I said, okay, well, if you want to keep the American, number one, we have to change vernacular. Number two, she can't be from this part of the US. She has to be from another part of the US, because I can just tell you the way she talks. She's not, and it's not even an accent. It's just her vibe is not from there. She has to be from somewhere else. Or you can just make her Australian, because that's what resonated. Guess what? When she finally got her publishing deal, the character's Australian. Like, everything is changeable. But what is most important is that as the writer, you connect wholeheartedly, unreservedly, even if you feel like, but wait, I don't know everything about them. Cool, even better. I have lots of advice about how to jump into that, because that is super fun, to get to know somebody that you think you just made up and then let them talk to you. That's awesome. But the truth is that some of us, especially around our parents or other family members, will never give ourselves full permission to tell our truth because it feels too scary. So why fight when you can just take the path of least resistance, which is fictionalize it? Guess what? Depending on who you're approaching, and especially as a debut author, it's a hell of a lot easier to sell a novel than it is a memoir if you're not a celebrity. It's not impossible, but it's actually a little bit easier. So if traditional publishing is the way that you'd eventually like to go, let yourself see that publishers take chances more often on really authentic, real, well-written fiction than they do on nonfiction. That's a sad truth.
I have another question related to that. So
yeah,
what if there are some details that are essential, let's say, to the story that would give you away, like would give your identity away? Or so how do you deal with that? At that point, do you use a pen name? But then if you want, so
yeah, it's tough. And I have a client I'm shopping around for memoir at the moment, and it got so confusing that she's using a pen name and she's chosen a different name for the character in the story. So I had to kind of explain it, and I'll get that client to just choose a name, like one pen name. You're never fully, it's like anything good. You're never going to feel fully confident that people won't figure you out. If you write fiction and it's set on Pluto and they have names that you can't pronounce, which is, by the way, is a horrible idea. I know people love it. I don't. I have to pronounce their names. If I can't, I have to, I look away. But even if you did that, the people in your life will be compelled to read it and find themselves. You know, it's
Yeah.
hilarious. They're oftentimes wrong about who they are, unless you've really kept them very close to the thing. They'll also guess themselves as like this person, but really that person's actually an amalgamation of multiple people, because we also don't need all the people. In memoir, going through edits, one of the things you have to reconcile is we don't need it all. This is not daily journal biography, because that is tedious for most people. Most people don't live a life that's that exciting. Very few people warrant an actual biography, and I'm even including all the famous people. But the truth is, it will be winnowed down based on what our ultimate transformation, what we're trying to share is. So in the first writing, I'd rather have you overshoot your number of words. I'd rather have you share stuff that won't happen. And like I said, if you're really concerned from the beginning, if you have a hard time starting and you think, oh, if I just get a book title, then I'll start, or if I just pre-design a cover, then I'll know no, stop that. Write the book. And if you can't write the book, then write a different book, right? Here's another thing. I would say almost always memoir is the one to start with. However, like I said, you can feel comfortable that even if you chose fiction, you're still kind of writing a little bit memoir. We can't help ourselves.
Yeah.
It's what will come up. So write an outline, write a basic structure where you cover off what's more important than details. This is hard to hear sometimes with memoir. It's always about the emotional authenticity. So even if you're writing fiction, I have a client, she wrote this beautiful work. In her real life, she was going through some struggle, and so her escape was writing this commercial in this fiction. The truth is that every time she wrote something that was emotionally raw, totally different scenarios, not at all the same, but she was fully invested and brought that today, right now, present day emotion to the other character, and that gave it that emotional authenticity. So as a beginner, it's easier to keep it as close as possible, but change it. If people want to see themselves, they will. If you have a perpetrator, well, number one, that's creepy if a perpetrator's reading your work even years after. But you know what? Like, it's a free country and they can read whatever books, and they're available in libraries. But if you don't name them and you've made changes, and at the beginning of every book, I don't know if you've noticed, but there is a disclaimer.
Yeah.
You put the disclaimer in, you don't call anybody anything, and there are enough differences for you to go to court and say this wasn't them. Like, how are they going to prove? Who's going to be able to prove that character is them?
It takes me to one question that I myself have had, because I was thinking about one of the books that I wanted to write was about the title would have been My Boyfriend at the Time, and it would have been all the lessons learned from all the different boyfriends. And one of the boyfriends that I had, and I'm taking this example from my personal life, but there's a lot of examples from my previous book as well, and clients or people, members of the group, is that boyfriend, one specific boyfriend, used to do drugs, like hard drugs. Mm-hmm. And I was a teenager, and it was a long story, like in terms of time. Yeah. So if I share that story and I say, because a lot of the things that happened were important because of how young I was. Yeah. So mentioning the age to me would be important. Because, while my friends, one thing that comes to mind is while my friends were talking about having sex for the first time and, oh my God, my first boyfriend, I was thinking about, oh my God, my boyfriend calls me at 2:00 after his fix and I have to stay on the phone because I'm afraid he's going to overdose. So, So how do I share this information, or how does any member share information that would give away the identity of someone else? Or just a quick example, if something is happening from between the author and the parent, mother or father, it's a relationship that you can't transpose to something else, to the neighbor. So how do you deal with that?
Like I said, this is why I love fiction. Don't be afraid of fiction. So here's the other reason why we do it. Because I don't know if you've had this, I've only come across one writer who said, no, they've never done this. And I might have asked you this last time too, but have you ever not written something in your journal that you know nobody's going to read, but you find it like you're judging it? Like, even if I read it back, like it's too shameful. You don't put your whole truth down because it's ugly. It's especially hard if you want to share like an ugly, abhorrent thought that you've had. Like some of the bravest writers I know, like the mother who would share stuff about her children, and she's not saying she doesn't love her children, but does she sometimes wish she'd taken another, and she's totally shares the truth of it. Very few of us, and this is okay, have the wherewithal to struggle with our conscious mind and do it and go and put ourselves out there for that. So there's nothing wrong with that. Stop trying to better your human side and say, but I want to heal myself. And part of healing myself is getting this out. First, you may not actually have to share that. Just putting it out there. Maybe you do. But what I know you definitely have to do is you definitely have to write about whether or not that ever gets published and other people have to know about it is not for now. That's not a decision for now. But if you're still stuck, if it's still hard, then just fictionalize it, because I guarantee you, even more than that, if you're already having that, there are other parts that your conscious mind is not going to let you write down, that I, as a reader, as a consumer, as a just wholehearted super fan of humanness, want is your real raw truth. Why? Because I want to see if I'm the only wacko out there. And you being too afraid to go there is the problem. So don't make it you. Make it someone else. Make it a dude of another, who grew up in another culture. But this is what I'm saying. At least experiment with it, right? And maybe if you get going, you find that it's, and here's the thing, it doesn't matter if it's thinly veiled, right? It just has to be fiction. And what you'll find is the more you do fiction, the more you like to do fiction. Because then, you know, for all of those people you'd like to get revenge on, that's like a whole thing. I had that in a Facebook writers group feed. What do you think about revenge in, you know, fiction? Go for your life. Why? Because first draft is for you. And maybe you'll feel better after you get your fictional revenge. And maybe you'll realize that it was more hollow feeling. Or maybe you'll feel like, hot damn, I'm going to write the new female superhero, and she is going to wreak havoc and take down all these dickheads. You know, like, I don't know.
Love that.
So just have fun. So number one, test it by actually doing some of that. First draft is for you, for nobody else. Not even an editor has to read it, but just get it out for the love of all that's holy, because you need to get it out. And then you can make a decision. But number two, if it still won't come out, if as you're writing it, you get that feeling, I'm still holding back. If you see those wheels turning, trying to hide things behind curtains, give yourself permission to do it a different way, because that way, when it's fiction, you don't have to hide anything. You think that Paula Hawkins hid anything on Girl on a Train? I mean, unreliable narrator. Like, how hard? That's pretty hardcore, because she's writing a book about a character who's an alcoholic. She's gonna take heat if she ever had a drink or ever got hungover or anything around anybody. Oh, I wonder if that's a little bit her. Every author gets that,
Yeah.
right? So you're not safe from that. So just own it and have some fun. Have some fun. God, I'm getting into this. I really need my water.
And one thing that's going, well, two things that are going in my mind right now is, first, as you're saying this and I'm thinking, how am I going to turn this into fiction? I'm thinking, oh, maybe it would just be easier to write it as a memoir. Like, get brave, just write it as a memoir and do it.
And see. And just see. Well, I have to tell you, even, I don't know what the format was going to be anyway, but epistolary style, which is writing letters, is very popular, even more popular in fiction. I mean, I haven't got them, I should have them listed in my brain, but I know of a lot of publishers that like that. And as many people know, letter writing is incredibly therapeutic. Right. The other thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that at the end of the day, what is safe about memoir, and why I still would always recommend you write everything you need to write, but know that no reader really wants to read somebody else's perspective. I mean, third person, it's a little different. But if you're writing memoir, you're definitely not writing third person. It's, you own your experience. You own your translation of it. You own every part that was you. And every time you start to veer off and say, so-and-so did this and they did this, and I think it's because of this, now we're not with you anymore. Again, the painting is blurring up on the subject that we should be focused on, and now we're over here. Right? So some self-responsibility is part of that, right? So some great memoirs, other than Eat, Pray, Love, and Wild, if people haven't read, highly inflammatory to the parents, The Glass Castle by Anjanette Walls, go get that. If you want to read something where you think, wow, how did she write that and share that? Like, she burned herself at 3 years old making her own hot dogs because mom was painting and was like, go do it yourself. I have a 5.5-year-old. I'm like, oh my God, the thought of it is frightening that my daughter would even think about it. I'm certainly not encouraging her to be in charge of making her own boiling water hot dogs. So there are plenty of really great examples, but Wild is a good example too. There's very little where Cheryl Strayed is straying into somebody else's version of the story. She's with hers. She owns her experience. That's what we would be looking for in memoir, right?
And that somehow ties in with one of the questions we had, which was writing in first person or third person, like writing in first person and writing about your story, or writing a more general self-help, from a general self-help voice.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's interesting, and it's a little bit different even from what we talked about before. Let me address that really quickly. I'm not going to make any assumptions about who some of the writers are who might be watching this. It would take a pretty damn experienced person to get away with, omniscient third person in self-help memoir. You think about the people that do it. And also, I don't always think it's a great idea because there's a separation there. And that is sort of the antithesis of what we're looking for in writing, as far as I'm concerned. The name of the game in the whole game is connection. That's how we're hardwired, right? Even if you don't believe it, but I'm an introvert. I can just talk a hell of a lot, especially about story and writing. But we're all hardwired to want to connect, which is why it's so important for us to share first for ourselves authentically, so that when we share with others, they can truly connect. That's what we say, things like, if it only reaches one person, if it only helps one person, that's called connection. If you're writing from third person, it puts a lot of pressure on you, because now you are coming from a point of view of like, learn from me, I am on high. And I get where some editors, like, it's often now seen as not quite as interesting, but I think there are a couple of ways to handle it. Number one, I think that most memoir should be in first person, because it was about you. So anybody who's like, oh, memoir, oh, it's so self-indulgent. Memoir is what it could be called. It's about the person who wrote it. It should be. That's their version.
Yeah.
But that's how we connect better. So almost across the board, for the first draft, I recommend first person present. And there's a reason I even stipulate present, because as soon as we take our hindsight view, now we're not in it anymore. You cannot be authentic with your emotion. Think about you and those, the boyfriend at the time. Well, you're not that teenage girl anymore. So if you're writing as if, there's like, distance, you're not going to fully be able to connect. But if you write as if you're living it now, we can relight that fire, hopefully, about what you were feeling then. Because that's what was true then. You weren't the you now living the then, and that doesn't work, right? So your version, the first version, first person present.
Yeah.
So we can get that emotional authenticity. And then further version, we can make a call. Sometimes the structure itself tells us. Sometimes the genre tells us. And I think go with that. So I don't have, after the first draft, I don't have any hard and fast rules. It really depends on your target market and how they best connect with the writing, because after your draft, and you can string it out. Like, I won't say second, third, because I won't even scare people with how many drafts your book actually can go through. We won't tell you. But rest assured, once you're ready to hand it over to an editor other than yourself, it's not for you. And that's why finding an editor that you trust and resonate with and that you know will honor your voice is paramount. And then I had this conversation this morning with an author. When a traditional publisher takes you on board, if they are fronting money of any kind and they are paying someone to edit you, if they make a decision, like, number one, they must have liked your manuscript in the first place or they wouldn't have taken it. So if that's the case, then almost all the time, you just take whatever they want you to do. And not because your voice doesn't have value, but they know their market. Why? Because they have a vested interest in this selling. And if they think that a change will make it sell better, you want that too. Because guess what? You got your transformation. Nobody can take that from you. You got it when you were writing that baby. And now you really have to think about, who are the people that I can go to that know what the reader needs? And that's part of what can inform your decision about whether or not you feel traditional publishing or self-publishing is for you. But you better get used to it anyway if you're going to get it edited, which everyone needs to get it edited. A separation between you and the work, because it's no longer you. And I think Liz Gilbert has a thing about that too. It's really, it's not for you anymore. So
and I think
let it go.
That also answers another question that we had. You touched it already, but one of our members asked whether, when you said the first draft is for the writer, whether you meant the act of writing or the content. So it's
Yeah.
both at the end of the day.
It's both. Yes. And
Yeah.
that's hilarious because I was thinking in my head when you said that, it's like, the answer is it's both. It's both. Because, like I said, when you start, you never, ever, ever really know how it's going to end. Right? And that's part of the magic. Like, if we all knew the outcome to everything, how boring. How boring. If you knew the outcome to the computer issues,
Oh, God.
you would not have said that statement, right? You would have stopped yourself because you would have overthought it. And instead, not to say that it hasn't been a bumpy few weeks, but you actually got what you needed. You could never have twisted your arm and made you do it if you had everything around you. So you put the call out, this is what I need. And the universe is like, thank you, sister. I will help you with that. And you're like, damn, no, I want that, but I have to do all the things. The writing process is the same. Because this is my jam. We live a story, and we don't just live it writing the story, we live it while we're writing the story, we're writing, and we're living it as a part of, it's hard to get the story out. That's part of the story. Like, it's one of those never ending, a mirror and a mirror and a mirror and a mirror.
God, yeah.
That's it. But instead of thinking about it as like a really negative thing, I think, hot damn, as soon as you recognize it, then you can lower your shoulders a bit and go, okay, this is just part of it. It's uncomfortable right now, but I will keep on moving forward. And as long as you're moving forward, that's that progress that we're talking about. You stay, and this is also why writing first person present helps the writer stay present. If we give ourselves the opportunity at any time for another voice, like the hindsight voice, to come in, we start to overthink parts of our story. Now we're not there. Now we're thinking, oh, is that the best way to, you just have to keep a lid on it as much as possible, knowing you're going to take that advice, but everything that can keep you present to what you're writing is the thing you should do. So that's why I don't care what it is. Like, is there another tip and trick I can give to help you do that? Because I will do it. Like, that's why. Is it fiction? Is it permission? Is it writing it longhand? Because then you definitely know nobody's going to accidentally hit publish on it. Whatever. I mean, this is why the psychology of it is so huge to me. We're all a little bit different. And what we need to do is just find our path of least resistance. There was one other question we kind of answered, but I know it was about other people reading. It was really about a memoir, whether it's parents, but somebody else was talking about framing it for market, like for a child or their child.
So
or
basically, she was trying to find the target not the target, the one person you're writing to. And she said that she wanted it to be her son, but then when she thought about the writing process, there were some stories that she wouldn't feel comfortable telling her son, or that her son already knows, so it will feel inauthentic to write that stories in the book to her son because her son in real life already knows. So she was thinking, but there's also this other ideal reader, and she was wondering whether it has to be one or the other through the whole book, or if you can choose some stories that would go, for example, to the son, and other stories that would go to the other ideal reader, as long as you are writing to one ideal reader for each chapter.
Okay, so my advice would be try as much as possible to write one book at a time. I'm not going to make it so one thing that came up for me is there ever a time, i.e. an age, at which she'd say, I'm just going to, or is it only like after my death, do I want you to hear all this stuff? Because we just don't have that kind of relationship and I don't want to talk about that stuff in front of you. If possible, because I feel every time we're choosing somebody like that, it's because we want connection, right? We want them to know the real us. Well, it's not going to work if you're not actually wanting them to know the real you. If you're like, oh, I want you to know the edited version of me. Don't use that person. Love them. Copy some stories. So what I would say is write your true stories in this book to another person. If you can get a real person in your mind, better. But even if you have to create them, even if it was like you 10, 20 years ago, whatever, whoever it is, or somebody who's just come to you often, and I'm getting this simply because she's chosen her son. It sounds like it would be lessons, not just connection and revelation about who she really is, but really saying, look, I want to share these because I don't want you to go through all these things. So find that person, even if it's a younger version, and write that book and take the stories out that she thinks, oh, that would be so great for, like, she could do that for all sorts of family members or friends or whatever. Although it's a little like, I'll just be real. If the book is published, son's going to find it anyway. So you have to reconcile that he's going to find this stuff out. And then we're getting into stuff like, but what is wrong? Like, were you a serial murderer before and now you're coming clean? Or because other than that, and you can't help other people's judgments, if you're writing, I really want your writers to be in a place of self-acceptance. Okay, A Wrinkle in Time, the movie at least, was great in that its ultimate message was our strength is in our flaws. Sit in that space and know that actually, like I said, the connection comes from showing your flaws, ugly truths, and those are ugly truths about you, not about other people. I mean, about other people is neither here nor there. Like, okay, maybe, but we care more about you. And then how did you persevere, or how did you overcome them, or how did you own them and love yourself because of them? I don't even want to say despite, right?
Yeah.
So those are the most, I mean, Liz Gilbert probably has this up, but it was something about the strong women. Like the strong women that she admires aren't strong because nothing bad ever happened, but it's because it did, and they kept going and showed themselves. They were visible despite it. We've all done stuff we wish we hadn't. And when we get to the place of personal responsibility and self-acceptance, that's the learning. Now, I don't want people to write in third person, like, do as I'm saying, not as I did. But what people need, like the transformation that your reader gets, is going to be different than you. But we hope to guide it a little. And we're guiding it just in the stories we're sharing. It's not, even if you're being a little prescriptive, they're still going to take it or leave it. You know, like you say, do yoga every day. And they'll be like, yeah. Or they'll be like, nah, not me. Right? But what's more powerful is a story. And maybe they'll choose something that resonates with them. So I want all of your writers to think about this. To know that you have to write your full, all the things you need to write. You have to write them out. You don't have to publish all of them, but you do have to write them. Because if you're keeping them in, your reader will pick it up and then they will shut the book. Maybe they'll try to persevere, but that's the last thing you want. So write it all and then edit. Stop editing before you go. But yes, if that helps, change your ideal person and don't write 2 books at once. well,
Because I think
in two memoirs, two of the same story. That's what I mean. You can actually write multiple stories at a time, but it can't be that. I don't want you writing the same story to different people. That's sending the wrong message.
In the case of that client, she wasn't against sharing those stories, because that's why I said your son's going to read your book and he's going to read the stories anyway. And she said, it's not about the sharing of the stories in general. It's about being in that mindset of telling the story to my son because I wouldn't feel comfortable telling it to him, or because he already knows the story.
Yes.
So,
that's
what I thought.
I get
it. To change the person, I suggested she wrote a letter to her son on the side.
Yes.
And then chose the ideal reader who would be ready and who she would feel comfortable telling the stories to, who doesn't already know them, so she doesn't feel like she's repeating herself.
Yeah, and look, what's hilarious is I only just recently saw something about that it's women who are concerned about repeating stories. No, dead set. It was so freeing to know that women are like, oh, stop me if I've said this one before. Oh, I'm so sorry. And then we're like mortified if it accidentally slipped out. Did you know that men are the opposite? Men intentionally reshare the same story. You've never heard a guy say, stop me if you've heard that. Like, if they do, they're joking because they're still going to tell you. Right? They're not going to stop. That's why dad, granddad, that's, and especially if they're telling a story that's got something to it, like the size of the fish they caught gets bigger, like the number of miles they had to walk gets longer, like because the reason they're communicating is different. They are reliving the exhilaration of the hunt, right? Whereas women, we are, and I just saw this too, from a comedian, and it was like a slight tweak to this, but women are doing it to connect. But way back when, we did it because when the men were out hunting and gathering and stuff, we were back sharing about like, oh, hey, if you see this berry out there, do not eat that, because that's going to give you like a horn. Or like we're sharing really important, you might die information. And so once we've shared that information, we don't want to repeat it because we already know, right? So we're like, oh, I don't want to bore you. It's really about connecting, but also imparting something new, a new revelation, a new sort of version, a new discovery, something new. Because if it's old, oh my God, God forbid, you already know the story about how you were born or whatever. Tell it. So yes, free yourself from worrying about repeating. But by the way, that happens in every memoir as well. There will be a subset of person who knows this stuff because they might have been there with you, like they lived it, and they might say, "Yeah, that's not how it happened." Who cares? Go write your book. That's awesome. I will read your book when you have finished writing your version of events. But until then, here's mine. And even that client that I said I'm shopping her memoir, and she changed her name. That's an epistolary style. And so one of the things that we ended up tweaking was there was that mix. So she's writing to somebody where some of it had to be told in a letter to somebody who already would have known, right? Because they were there, but she has to share some of it because, of course, the reader doesn't know this stuff. So just go with what's authentic, with what feels good. And for the love of God, stop overthinking it. Share what you need to share and worry about editing the boring, the confusing, the repetitive, because you will repeat yourself. Even in the story, we can't help it. That's what we do, right?
So, I just realized there's one more question that we didn't address, which is one of our members asked, So who, because I said the title of this guest expert session is the writer, the first draft is for the writer. And so
Yes.
her question was, okay, so who should I focus on when writing my second draft? So meaning when she's doing her rewrites. So
yes. If you're doing it yourself, I want you now to step back and give a thought to your reader. So now I want you to think about the person you wrote it to and try to see it. So this is why from first draft to second draft, even if it's your own editing, put it away for at least 4 weeks. Start another project, do something else, but please, pretty please, put it away for 4 weeks, at least 4 weeks. It's best if you schedule something that you cannot undo, that will keep you, like, honestly distracted, happily distracted, because you will do better by your manuscript. It will kind of be a waste of time. And it's a strong statement, but a true statement. It's kind of a waste of time to go back to it. You can't go, oh, next day, next week, in 2 weeks. I've seen it and it's not pretty. You'll go back, you'll have to do it again because you don't have perspective. You need to put it away and not look at it and go live some life, right? Go get some other experience. No, really, because sometimes, you know, when we talk about gathering those puzzle pieces, sometimes a damn puzzle piece still hasn't dropped yet. And you go find it when the manuscript is in the drawer. We call it in the drawer, but it's on your computer. Okay, so just put it away. And then when you go back and read it, I want you to read through without editing. But think about, if I'm this reader, X, and I'm opening this, how's it go? Like, just get it from an experiential point of view. Can you follow it? Does it engage you as a reader who's never read what this amazing writer is writing? And you may well, I mean, I would hope, have that experience. Like, I don't remember writing this at all. Like, that was even my life. And I don't remember, that's damn good. Like, that's pretty good. And then you'll have other sections, you're like, what did I even say there? Like, I don't even know what that is. Awesome. Because that gives you something to work with. But it's still, I have a thing, every edit after, unless you have to go back, like if you have a very sparse first draft and it's really like a very expanded, extended outline, and you're still doing some creative work in there. If you're still doing creative work, I want you to still think about you, because chances are there's some stuff you didn't get out that you need to. Like if there's sections you didn't write, saying come back to this and write this whole scene, you know what, maybe and that's why I say go in that first read through and just observe what's there. Now when you go to edit properly, every edit after is thinking about the reader's experience. The reader, every one of them. Even a professional editor should be thinking about the reader, not themselves. That's how you successfully edit multiple voices and multiple different things. So that's the other thing I would say, depending on what you're writing, find somebody who is adept at editing that type of manuscript, and you already resonate with them, because you're going to have to get real with yourself about stuff that they say. And if you don't like them, some of the stuff they say is going to be hard. So you really have to trust their expertise and their ability to value your voice. That all the changes they're going to suggest aren't changing your voice, but like Chris does so beautifully, she's going to make it so it sounds better. Like, nobody wants to publish a book and think somebody's out there saying she's a little bit, you know, dim with some of the grammatical stuff. Like, it doesn't, in that case, for all of us, English is our second language. If you're writing in English, by the way, it's a damn hard language. So don't be precious. Just say, oh, thank you for clarifying my sentence, Chris, or whomever. Like, you're right. That was awkward. I thought it was totally correct, but apparently I've been using the wrong word for the entirety of my life. That may happen. It happens. even to those of us who started with English, I promise. It does.
Oh my God, that was another excellent session. Thank you, Anjanette.
Yay!
I'm pretty sure there will be questions coming up again.
Yeah, so let's do another one in a couple of months. But no, because especially as people get further and further along, you don't know.
Yeah,
you don't know what you're going to ask, and I don't know, but you can tell. Like, I'm on fire now. It's nighttime, and I'm going to have to do something to wind. I'm going to have to like wind down because I'm amped. I should be in Italy so I can just go out and run around in the sunshine. But yeah, I'm gonna have to take like a bath or something and relax so I can go to sleep. Because I could do this all day. I love sharing.
I can see it. I can feel it. I love it. And I was actually going to say to you like 20 minutes ago, oh my God, lady, you're on fire. Totally, yeah.
I just feel like, yeah, well, it's bad if I have to take a drink because I can't, my throat is so dry. So, but here's the thing. I know that part of my purpose is to help unlock things. The last thing I want is for anybody to stop writing. Pause if you must, and sometimes you must.
Yeah.
But don't stop, because especially if you're writing memoir, even if you change it to fiction so you can get the real juicy stuff out, that's what we want. And you will get the same transformation that you need to, even if you fictionalize it, it will happen. But I want to unlock anything I can so that people continue to share their stories, because that's why we're here. So yeah, feel free, just gather up some more questions for me and ping me again. Yes. And I'll chat at you again.
Thank you so much, Anjanette. And that was awesome, really awesome. Okay. So thank you.
See you next time.